Welcome to Classified Capsule, where we delve into the lives of history's most infamous figures. Today, we explore the troubled childhood of Aileen Wuornos, one of America's most notorious female serial killers. From her tumultuous early years to the events that shaped her future, we'll uncover the factors that contributed to her descent into a life of crime. Let's dive into the early life of Aileen Wuornos. Aileen Wuornos was born on February 29, 1956 in Troy, Michigan to Diane Wuornos and Leo Pittman. Her early life was marked by instability and trauma, factors that would have a profound impact on her later years. Wuornos's parents were both troubled individuals. Diane Wuornos, Aileen's mother, was a teenage runaway with a history of criminal behavior. Leo Pittman, Aileen's father, was a convicted sex offender who had been imprisoned for crimes against children. Diane and Leo's marriage was short-lived, and the couple separated before Aileen was born. Diane Wuornos was left to raise Aileen and her older brother Keith on her own. The family's poverty and lack of stability made it difficult for Diane to provide a stable home environment. Aileen Wuornos's early childhood was characterized by significant instability. Diane Wuornos struggled with financial difficulties and frequently moved from place to place. This instability was compounded by a lack of consistent parental guidance and emotional support. When Aileen was just 4 years old, her mother abandoned her and her brother, leaving them in the care of their grandparents. The children's grandparents, who lived in a small rural community, were ill-equipped to provide the necessary care and stability. The neglect and lack of proper parental supervision during this period had a lasting impact on Aileen. During her time with her grandparents, Aileen and her brother experienced further trauma. Wuornos was subjected to physical and emotional abuse by her grandfather. This abusive environment contributed to her developing a deep-seated sense of mistrust and a feeling of worthlessness. Aileen Wuornos's teenage years were marked by increasing instability and criminal behavior. At the age of 14, Wuornos was sent to a juvenile detention center after being caught stealing. Her time in juvenile detention further exacerbated her feelings of abandonment and mistrust. By the age of 15, Wuornos had dropped out of school and was living on the streets. She began engaging in various forms of criminal behavior, including prostitution. Wuornos's experiences on the streets were marked by violence, exploitation, and a constant struggle for survival. This period of her life was crucial in shaping her later criminal behavior, as she became increasingly hardened and distrustful of others. During this time, Wuornos also experienced a series of personal traumas. She was raped and sexually assaulted multiple times, which contributed to her growing anger and bitterness towards men. These experiences were significant in shaping her perception of relationships and her subsequent criminal actions. Relationships and further criminal activity. In her late teens and early 20s, Aileen Wuornos continued to live a life of crime and instability. She had a series of turbulent relationships, including a brief marriage to a man named Louis Gratz Fell. The marriage was short-lived and marked by violence and dysfunction. Wuornos's relationship with Fell ended in divorce, and she continued to struggle with various forms of criminal behavior, including theft and fraud. Wuornos's criminal activities and relationships often involved violence and exploitation. Her encounters with the criminal justice system became more frequent, and she was arrested several times for various offenses. These encounters with law enforcement further deepened her feelings of alienation and distrust. The nature of Wuornos's crimes. Aileen Wuornos's criminal spree was characterized by a series of violent murders. Between November 1989 and January 1990, Wuornos killed 7 men in Florida. Her modus operandi involved targeting men who were her clients in the prostitution trade. Wuornos would typically lure these men with promises of sex, only to rob and murder them. Her actions were marked by extreme violence and a disturbing sense of retribution. Wuornos's method of killing varied, but she often used firearms. She would typically shoot her victims multiple times, often at close range. The murders were committed in a brutal and methodical manner, reflecting Wuornos's deep-seated anger and mistrust of men. The victims. Richard Mallory. Wuornos's first victim was Richard Mallory, a 51-year-old convicted sex offender. On November 30, 1989, Wuornos shot Mallory multiple times after he picked her up for sex. She claimed that Mallory had assaulted her and that she killed him in self-defense. Mallory's body was found in his abandoned car, and his murder set the pattern for Wuornos's subsequent crimes. David Spears. The second victim was David Spears, a 43-year-old construction worker. On June 1, 1990, Spears was found dead in a wooded area, having been shot 6 times. His body was discovered several weeks after his murder, and he had been reported missing prior to this. Charles Carskadden. Charles Carskadden, a 40-year-old rodeo worker, was Wuornos's third victim. His body was found on June 6, 1990, in a rural area near the town of Citrus County. Carskadden had been shot several times. His murder was similar in nature to the previous ones, with Wuornos claiming that he had tried to assault her. Troy Burris, a 50-year-old sausage salesman, was Wuornos's fourth victim. He was found dead on July 31, 1990. Burris had been shot twice in the back of the head, and his body was discovered in a rural area. Wuornos claimed that Burris had picked her up for sex, and that she had killed him in self-defense. Peter Seams, a 65-year-old man who was traveling from Florida to his home in Ohio, was Wuornos's fifth victim. On June 8, 1990, Seams was found dead after being shot multiple times. His body was discovered in a remote area, and he had been reported missing prior to this. Walter Geno Antonio, a 62-year-old truck driver, was Wuornos's sixth victim. Antonio was found dead on June 19, 1990, in a rural area. He had been shot multiple times. Wuornos claimed that Antonio had picked her up for sex and that she had killed him in self-defense. James Dvorak, a 57-year-old businessman, was Wuornos's seventh and final victim. Dvorak was found dead on July 4, 1990, in a rural area. He had been shot multiple times. Dvorak's murder was similar in nature to the previous ones, with Wuornos claiming that he had tried to assault her. The motives behind the crimes. Aileen Wuornos's motivations for her crimes were complex and multifaceted. Her life was marked by significant trauma and hardship, which played a crucial role in shaping her criminal behavior. Wuornos claimed that her murders were acts of self-defense against men who had attempted to assault or exploit her. However, evidence suggested that her motives were also driven by a desire for control, financial gain, and a deep-seated mistrust of men. Wuornos's background, characterized by a history of abuse, neglect, and criminal behavior, contributed to her perception of men as threats. Her experiences on the streets, including repeated assaults and exploitation, further fueled her anger and bitterness. The violence she inflicted on her victims can be seen as an extension of her own feelings of powerlessness and a means of exerting control over her environment. The arrest and initial confessions. Aileen Wuornos's criminal spree ended in January 1991, when she was arrested for the murder of James Dvorak. Wuornos had been on the run, and her arrest was the result of a combination of forensic evidence and law enforcement efforts. Her capture was facilitated by a series of tips and leads that led investigators to her location. Wuornos's arrest marked a turning point in her life. During her interrogation, she initially denied involvement in the murders but later confessed to killing the 7 men. Her confessions were detailed and included information about the methods and motives behind the crimes. Wuornos claimed that she had killed the men in self-defense, asserting that they had attempted to assault or exploit her. However, her confessions, combined with forensic evidence, painted a different picture of her actions. The trial and media sensation. Aileen Wuornos's trial began in 1992 and quickly became a media sensation. Her case attracted significant public and media attention, partly due to the sensational nature of her crimes, and partly due to the dramatic elements of her life story. The trial was marked by its high-profile nature, and Wuornos's story was covered extensively by the media. During the trial, Wuornos's defense team attempted to present her actions as a result of self-defense and her troubled background. They argued that her experiences of abuse and exploitation had driven her to commit the murders. However, the prosecution argued that Wuornos's crimes were premeditated and driven by a desire for financial gain. Wuornos's trial resulted in her conviction for the murders of 7 men. She was found guilty on all counts, and the jury recommended the death penalty. Wuornos's conviction and subsequent sentencing were widely covered in the media. contributing to the public's fascination with her case. After her conviction, Aileen Wuornos began the appeals process. Her defense team argued that she had been subjected to an unfair trial and that her mental health issues had not been properly addressed. Wuornos's appeals were based on claims of inadequate legal representation, issues with the trial process, and her own mental state. Despite these appeals, Wuornos's legal challenges were largely unsuccessful. Her case was reviewed multiple times, but her convictions and death sentence were upheld. Wuornos remained on death row at Florida State Prison, where she continued to attract media attention and engage in various legal battles. While on death row, Wuornos gave a series of interviews and made several statements about her crimes. Her interviews revealed a complex and conflicted individual who struggled with her own perceptions of guilt and innocence. Wuornos's statements during this period were often inconsistent and reflective of her troubled mental state. Aileen Wuornos's legal battles and appeals ultimately proved unsuccessful, and her execution was scheduled for October 9, 2002. Her execution was carried out by lethal injection, and Wuornos was pronounced dead at 9:47 a.m. that day. Wuornos's execution was the culmination of a tragic and tumultuous life. Her final moments were marked by a mix of defiance and resignation. In her last statement, Wuornos expressed a sense of betrayal and anger towards those who had wronged her. Her execution was carried out amid significant media attention, and her death marked the end of a life that had been marked by extreme violence and tragedy. Aileen Wuornos's downfall left a lasting impact on the criminal justice system and the public's perception of female serial killers. Her case highlighted issues related to mental health, the criminal justice system, and the treatment of women involved in violent crimes. Wuornos's life and crimes have been the subject of numerous books, documentaries, and films. Her story has been examined from various perspectives, including psychological, legal, and social viewpoints. The media's portrayal of Wuornos and her case has contributed to ongoing discussions about the nature of criminal behavior and the treatment of individuals with troubled backgrounds. Thank you for watching this episode of Classified Capsule. If you found this exploration of Aileen Wuornos's downfall insightful, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more deep dives into the lives of history's most notorious figures. Don't forget to hit the bell icon to stay updated on our latest content. See you next time.